Good evening. At our board meeting on January 25th, we formally began the budget presentation process and provided you with a preview of where we were with developing the 22-23 budget. Since then, we have put together a proposed budget, and the purpose of tonight's presentation is to provide a broad overview of that budget. We start all of our work by taking a look at our district mission. Our budget is designed around the efforts to actualize our mission. We're looking to empower our students to be three things: lifelong learners, dynamic thinkers, and compassionate and contributing citizens. We want to do all this in a learning community characterized by a rich, differentiated programs, a safe, supportive environment, while students are able to explore their individual passions and celebrate accomplishments, all while providing leadership and service opportunities to them. We'll also take a moment to revisit our district goal around our fiscal responsibilities. We are looking to provide equitable access to exceptional learning opportunities while maintaining our academic excellence, providing for a transparent budget process that offers community input, as well as engaging and energizing the legislative advocacy and community involvement. Our budget is designed to help us meet the strategies in our strategic plan. We have strategies in leadership, where we're looking to hire, develop, and retain professional staff from a diverse point of view, and provide them with continuous and ongoing professional learning and support. We're looking to have a differentiated instruction and future-ready curriculum plan. We are also looking at a multifaceted approach to wellness, along with providing for an engaging homeschool and community communications, and allowing for our district facilities, equipment, and supplies to be maintained and optimized, all while providing a safe, collaborative, and flexible environment. Lastly, we're looking at leveraging our partnerships to expand our learning communities. So again, that is a review of the 6 strategies that are embedded in our strategic plan that we're currently working towards. Another brief review of the budget calendar. We start developing the budget in August with discussions, and we move those discussions into where we are tonight with a proposed budget. On January 25th, we presented a preview of this budget. Tonight, we're presenting my proposed budget, which is an overview presentation. We plan to use the next 3 board meetings on March 15th, 29th, and April 5th to have more in-depth conversations with the schools and departments about their facets as they relate to the budget. After those presentations, the board will adopt the budget in April, and then finally in May, there will be a public hearing followed by a budget vote. Turn it over to my colleague at this point.
Thank you. And this is the slide that we introduced in January. And at that time, we said these are the next steps that we will continue to work on to develop this budget. So now we're going to give you an update. So the first item is resolved unknowns. And in 2 slides later, you will know that we try to resolve all the unknowns, but we still have unknowns. And so we are projecting quite a few numbers, and we'll let you know what they are. And then also we have finalized the personnel, and we have the existing personnel, and then the superintendent is going to talk about some changes that she's going to introduce. And then also we definitely identify additional savings, so we're able to come to you with a finalized budget. And we're at the step that we're presenting the superintendent's budget today. So these are the known factors that we talked about in January. So they remain the same. I think I'll highlight a couple things. So the projected enrollment still remain the same as January. We're going to see a slight decrease in the elementary school and middle school, and then we'll see an increase in the high school. And in fact, incoming 9th grade is actually a very large class. And we have employment contract for 2 units, the administrators and teacher aides. And then also the ERS number is 11.7, and the debt service is definitely finalized. And I think one thing that I want to mention is the CPI number. I just want to remind everyone, the CPI for last year is at 4.7, but later on, when we talk about the tax cap, we'll tell you that it's pretty much meaningless because we can only use 2%. And the most important slide, item on this slide is really the last item. We are ready to ask the board to approve the proposition for the middle school HVAC project, and this budget is heavily impacted by it. The budget is impacted, but the tax levy is not. So we're going to stress that point repeatedly. Oops. Okay, so these are the unknowns, and as you can see, we only got 2 resolved. So now we know the TRS number is going to be 10.29%, which is a 5% increase from the current rate of 9.8%. This is an important number because this will impact the benefits part. And the largest number of our employees is in the TRS system. And then now we have the tax cap. The important thing to note is that our budget is under the tax cap. So we'll talk about it later. And so the other 3 items are still unknown, and we are in the process of negotiating the 3 bargaining contracts. One is with the teachers, one is for the nurses, and the other one is with CSEA. And the education, special education placement for both in-district and out-of-district, this is still a work in progress. CSE meetings are being held, and eventually, of course, we'll know the placements. And the tuition students, there are 3 parts to this. One is the other districts' placement into our school for special education services. And of course, those schools are also going through the CSE meetings, so that part is unknown. And also we have another part for tuition students is the students from Botanical Hills. And these are the students, we already have the list, so that's known to us. And then the third part is we are allowing 5 students to pay tuition to come to our high school. Right now, I know the superintendent and the high school principal, they are interviewing candidates at this point. So that is still unknown also. I'll turn this back to.
So in Budgeting 101, you always look at the 4 pillars of a school budget. You look at the class size and maintaining your class sizes. You look at the integrity of your programs. You look at the infrastructure to execute those programs and maintain class sizes. And you also look at all your contractual obligations. This budget includes all of the necessary personnel to maintain those 4 pillars, and I would argue to improve them in certain areas. 2 next bullets sort of explain a little bit about that. We're looking at expanding instructional technology support and strengthening, updating, and expanding technology infrastructure. And we have the personnel planned in that to do that, and the materials and the supplies, and you'll be hearing more about that when Dr. Fajo presents his technology budget to us. And the 2 last things, Mr. Chow already talked about. It supports the middle school with the HVAC project, with the HVAC bond, with no tax impact in this year's budget. It also comes in below the tax cap. So this is really a point of pride in the developmental piece of this budget and what we were able to accomplish. And, you know, a lot of that credit goes to John and his team. We have a new director.
Assistant business.
Thank you, assistant business manager. John's right hand in the business office in doing this work and new to the district and working tirelessly under John's leadership to really get this done. So a lot to be proud of here in terms of where we are to be able to come in under the tax cap and support a middle school HVAC bond is truly impressive. In terms of the overall personnel changes that we're looking at, the two schools, the BRS and the middle school, are both looking at maintaining their permanent sub-teacher. So we mid-year fixed with this year, and we're looking to add it to the budget for next year. So they're each looking at one permanent sub-teacher. We're looking at a 7 through 12 science teacher. Again, we hired sort of part of that this year, and we're looking to add it at a 1.0 personnel add for next year. We have also 2 assistant coaches. These are the varsity girls and varsity boys basketball team coaches. And we're also looking at adding a support staff person up at district office. So those are the additions that we're looking at in terms of personnel. We're also looking at a reduction in the special education office of 3 teacher aide positions. So I just want to clarify, these are not people, these are positions that have remained unfilled, so we're removing them from the budget. So those are the big personnel changes that we're looking at, and again, this being an overview, the respective buildings and departments will get into a little bit more of the details around these personnel changes. I'll send it over to you again, John.
Okay. So here really is just a technical topic. In this budget, when you receive the budget, which will be posted after the board meeting, you will see that we actually are collapsing some budget codes. And these are the codes that we have consolidated. This is to simplify and also make it more efficient. Because I'll just give you an example. Right now we have textbook code for various topics, subject. You know, you have math textbooks, you have social studies, and you have English. And every time when we had to make a purchase and we don't have sufficient fund there, we had to do a budget transfer. So what we are doing, we have worked with the principals, and what we're doing is for each school, we have one code for each item. And therefore, this is up to the principal and assistant principal to make a decision where they're going to allocate the funds to purchase what kind of services or goods. So I just want to let you know, because when you get the budget, you will see those changes. And here is the proposed budget. So our proposed budget is at $57,712,488. This is a budget change of 7.2% increase. And this is the important part. We really want to stress that this is because there's a one-time use of fund balance, and therefore the budget increase is at 7.2%. And we had to go through this process because, and later on we're going to talk about it more, it's because we had to bring fund balance into the general fund and then transfer it out to capital fund. We cannot transfer money directly from fund balance into capital funds. This is the technical part, and we have to do it this way. But the good thing is that really the next number is the important one. This is the tax levy change. This is the one that's, of course, impacting the pocketbook. And we're talking about the tax levy increase is 1.72%. This is quite far below the tax cap that we are allowed to go up to. And so the tax cap is at 2.11%, and we are introducing the tax levy at 1.72%. So here, this is the expenditure. When you come to the budget, expenditures is always the most important part. So I'll spend a little bit more time here. So the first item is always the largest one, and salaries and employee benefits usually represent over 70% of the total budget because it is a service industry. And so in the salary, you see an increase of 1.93%. This is due to two parts. One is the contract increases, our contract obligations. And the second part is, I think the superintendent already talked about it, is because we're having some changes to personnel. We're increasing some personnel in certain areas. And the second part is the employee benefits. You'll see an increase of 5.72%. That is also a very large increase. It's over close to $700,000. This is because two things. One is the TRS number, which represented a 5% increase, which I talked about it earlier. And the second part, I think the largest impact is actually the health insurance premium. That has gone up by 12%, which is a very large number. And the third item is equipment. You see a decrease of close to $100,000. This is due to because for this year's budget, the 21-22 budget, we have a one-time purchase for the high school auditorium lighting. And we are going to do the purchasing this year. And therefore next year we don't need that money, and therefore you see a reduction. And then I think the next increase is not a surprise, it's the utilities. I think we're all seeing the impact, and so we have an increase of 21% in the budget. And then the contractual, the increase is $507,000, over 10%. I think when you hear the technology presentation and then also facilities, you will hear that one is, we're having some new plans for the technology area, and then also we had to do a BCS survey that we had to do every 5 years, and that's in this budget.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but do you have any idea what the tax rate change might be? The effective tax
Not yet.
rate
The
change?
reason is because I have to get the assessment first.
Oh, okay, we don't,
And the assessment, I'm sure, has changed.
okay.
We will give a projected
Well, I know we don't
tax
have a
rate.
final assessment till next August, but
Yeah, we
sometimes we
can't
have a.
finalize until at the end of June. Because right now, they are still going through all the petitions and all the adjustments.
Okay. Well, we usually have an estimate, like.
Yeah, you will have an
before-
estimate.
Okay.
But it's not going to be the
Before
exact.
June, though?
Hmm?
Before June?
Oh, we can get an estimate right now based on what they have on their assessment.
But they keep changing it.
But they finalized it, I think, around June 15th.
Okay.
That's why when we do the tax warrant, that's the final number, but not right now.
Okay.
The last part I'm going to talk about on this slide is the interfund transfer. So I will start with the first number, the 21-22. And because this number is repeated in the 22-23 budget. So we have 550,000 here, and this is made up of two parts. One is 95,000, that is for the interfund transfer to special aid fund. That is for the summer extended school year program that we are required to put in because the school district has the obligation to pay for 20% of it. So that's 95,000. The other 455,000, that is going to be interfund transfer into capital fund to support the middle school HVAC project. And so for the 22-23 school year, we have a $2.4 million transfer. This is, again, 95,000 is to special aid fund. The balance is all going into the capital fund to support the middle school project. We'll talk about it further at the later slide.
Can I ask one question related to this slide?
Yeah.
While you're here, do you know what the it's kind of irrelevant, but do you know what the budget change would be without the interfund transfer?
I forgot to mention that. Yes, it would be 3.6%.
Okay, thanks.
This is exactly half of it. If you use 1.9 million divided by the current year's budget, 53 million, is 3.6%. So without this capital project, the additional 1.9 million transfer, the budget increase would have been 3.6%. I'm so glad you asked
Thank
that
you.
question. I forgot to mention that. Okay, so this is still the expenditure budget, and it just give a representation of the percentage that it occupies for the whole budget. So if you look at this current year, the salaries and employee benefits I mentioned is always over 70% for school district. It is about 74%. And for this current, for next year, is slightly over 70%, but it's lower. It's all because of the interfund transfer that occupy a very large percentage. Now we go to the other part. The other half is the revenue. And this budget is a balanced budget. So you see the proposed revenue is exactly the same amount as the proposed expenditure. And the story here is that we have a large increase in state aid. That is because we have additional foundation aid for next year. And then also the appropriation you see is very large because we talked about it as an interfund transfer. And also the tax revenue. This tax revenue is different from the real property taxes. This tax revenue is sales tax. And the sales tax number has been going up, and therefore you see a projected increase of over 14%. And this is another way of showing the revenue. Just talk about the percentage for each item represented for the whole budget. And real property taxes is still the majority, the largest piece for the revenue sources. And here it shows the most recent budgets, and compared to prior years. Obviously, the outlier is the 7.2%, but I think Jill mentioned it. Without the interfund transfer, this is really a 3.6% budget-to-budget increase. And I think the most important part to know and to note is the tax levy change is 1.72%. And that is the tax levy increase. This is directly impacting the taxpayer, and this is below the tax cap.
John, one question. So built into that 7.2% is the amount coming from the general fund to fund the HVAC system. That money that's coming from that fund is aidable, so we get a percentage of that back.
Yes, I'll talk about it when
Okay.
we get to that, because I have a slide just dedicated to that project.
Fair enough.
Because the school board we are requesting that you approve the capital project, and that it has a direct impact on this. So this is where we are. So this is the same slides that we presented in December. It was December 15th. And at that time we talked, this is exactly the same slide. Okay, we didn't change. So these are the funding sources. So I'll go each item at a time. So the first one is ESSER. This is a federal grant that we apply specifically for this project. So that is approved already, and this is not aidable. We do get building aid, but this piece is not aidable because you cannot double dip. Because the funds are free to the school district, and therefore the state is not going to fund us again on this amount. And then we have leftover funds from the $8.9 million bond, and we have about $600,000. So these $600,000 will be used for the middle school project. And this is the one item that's going to take several steps to get us to the capital funds. The reason is because we have actually a large meeting with all the professionals, our bond counsel, our architect, our fiscal advisor, our external auditor, and they reviewed the specs for the $8.9 million bond. And that is, the middle school HVAC is not in there. And therefore, we cannot just use this $600,000 for this project. So at the next meeting, if you approve the capital project today, the $6 million we're asking you to approve, if you approve that project at the next meeting, we will transfer the $600,000 from the capital fund, because right now we already borrowed the money, it's sitting in the capital fund. We need to transfer first into the debt service fund. And then we'll bring it in from the debt service fund into the general fund. So this is there are several steps.
But can we clarify that some of this 600,000 is because we weren't going to do the HVAC project the way we're talking about doing it now. Part of the $8.9 million bond was to replace Univents, kind of do a piecemeal upgrade of certain parts of it. We ended up not doing that because we got this additional ESSER money, and we've decided now to do a more involved project the right way, and that's why we have this money left over. I just don't want people to think that we overestimated what we were going to spend the money on, and now we have this surplus that we shouldn't have taken out a bond for.
Right.
The money was originally supposed to address middle school HVAC issues. We
And
now
the
have an influx of
more
money that
limited.
we can address it in a much better, more comprehensive, thank you,
Yeah.
way. And that's why we're using this money for
Right.
that. But we still need approval
Right.
to use it, even though it's still for the middle school HVAC system. It's a different use of the money for a different purpose, so we have to
Right.
have a separate
Right,
Right.
transfer of funds to make sure that it's all legitimate.
right.
Okay.
Thank you. And then also the interfund transfer to capital fund from this current year, 21-22, we have $255,000. That also is for the middle school Univent. And this is going to be consolidated into this $6 million project. And in next year's budget that we are proposing, we're not increasing that amount because it's still the same $455,000, but it's going to be entirely dedicated to the middle school HVAC project. And then we have unassigned fund balance. Here we're saying $1,322,000. Just for your information, when we close out last year's budget, we had over 4% allowable unassigned fund balance. And that's a little bit over 1 million for several reasons. One is that we budgeted because we were told by the governor at the time that our state aid was going to be cut, and therefore we budgeted more conservatively. And we were able to close out a year with a surplus. And this is the place where we're going to use the money. And the last part is the bond. So we consolidated all the funds together. We came to $4 million, and we're short $2 million. And therefore, we need to borrow $2 million, and that is on the board agenda for your consideration to have a proposition for voters to approve the bond of $2 million. Now, I'll talk about the building aids. We are a state institution, and when we have approved capital projects, we actually get building aids. And our building aid ratio is 51.6%, which is a very high number. So earlier, I mentioned that the 1.3 million is not subject to building aid because the money is a grant from the federal government. And so if you deduct the 1.3 million from the 6 million, we have 4.6 million left. At 51.6%, we'll get more than $2.3 million in building aid. and we're gonna borrow $2 million. Of course, we had to pay interest, and we don't know the interest rate. And we'll probably not borrow until next spring. We're talking about spring 2023. But at this point, when we talk to our fiscal advisor, he thinks that the 2.3 million should cover the $2 million bond and the interest. But we don't know. But it should be very, very close. Okay, so I just want to stress the capital fund because, transfer to capital fund, this is because this is a little bit confusing. And also, this is going to be listed on our, the budget book itself. On the last page, you will see these things listed as transfer to capital fund. So the important part is that for 22-23, we're transferring $455,000 to middle school. This is our regular $455,000 for capital projects. And the other $600,000 is the $600,000 from the $8.9 million bond. And then separately, we are transferring $1.3 million. So this is the tax cap. I'm not going to go line by line. I think there are several things that I will stress. One is at the middle point, you can see the allowable growth factor is lesser of 2% or CPI. I think earlier I mentioned the CPI is 4.7%, but we can only use 2% because it's lesser of the two numbers. So we're using 2%. So that's in the calculation. And then the important thing is look at the bottom. Our tax cap increase, we could have gone to 2.112%, but we're introducing the tax rate increase at 1.72%. So we're coming under the tax cap. And we are required to file this with OSC, Office of the Comptroller. Donna reminded me today. But we already filed it yesterday, so. So this is filed, and we already met the requirements. So there will be three, at least at this point, there will be three propositions on the ballot on May 17th. The first one is the budget itself. The second one is the establishment of the capital reserve fund, which was approved by the board in November. So this will be placed on the ballot by the district clerk. And the third one is we'll need a board consideration today.
So to be clear, what we approved was putting it on the ballot to be voted on,
The third one.
The middle one.
the middle one.
It's on the agenda tonight.
And tonight, we're going to approve putting
The
the
third
third
one.
one
That's
on the
right.
ballot. We're
That's
not
right.
approving the bond itself, we're approving putting it on the ballot.
That's right. But there are two parts to that. If you read the resolution, first you're approving the project at $6 million. And then the $4 million, it says that the funds will be coming from various sources. And then you are putting on the ballot to borrow $2 million.
John, can you, I know you've explained it before, but for the people listening, can you explain the purpose of the capital reserve fund?
Sure. So capital reserve fund, this is different than the capital project fund. The capital funds is something that you borrow money and you put it in there for capital projects. Or you get the funds from interfund transfer, for example, from general fund you transfer into it. Whereas capital reserve fund is a fund that requires the school board to approve, to put it on the ballot for the voters to approve. This is for any capital projects that you need to do, the board approves, and then you can do. For example, one thing that I can think of is very important, and it will come due in a few years, is the turf field, for example. It would be replaced probably after 12 or 14 years. And that is going to be not a small amount of money. it's probably close to $1 million. If you have this capital reserve fund, and the capital reserve fund is using the fund balance at the end of the school year, you put it in there. So we're not taxing the taxpayers to get this fund. And then we put in the capital reserve for those projects that the school board identified. And then also requires the public to vote to approve it, to move it out and put it into the capital funds for use.
So just to be clear, this costs the voters nothing. We're establishing a place to put money in the future if there is money.
Right.
And then the
Exactly.
use of that money would also be subject to public approval, so
That's
it doesn't cost.
That's the great way to explain this. Yes,
Right.
exactly. It's not a cost, and we don't have a budget line to looking for funds to put into the capital reserve fund. This is only at the end of the school year. If we have fund balance for that school year, then we can move it into the capital reserve fund. And then there's a limit to that. That I think the board approved it for $4 million, so we cannot go exceed that.
Right.
And again, when we need to use it, we need to have the board approve it to put it on the ballot for the voters to approve. But at that time, also those funds will not cost the taxpayer. We just bring it in.
Right, they're already savings. It was a great idea. I believe you proposed it at one of your first meetings.
Yes, I think it's a prudent thing to do.
Before we move on very quickly, I just want to reiterate some things that are said tonight that I think are really important. So first of all, we had a situation where we had identified a problem in the middle school where we knew we needed to do some work when it came to HVAC, and we only had the funds to address it in a certain way. But the stars really sort of aligned in that A, we were able to get a grant, from the federal government, and B, last year we were told that the state funding could be cut by up to 20%, and so prudently we budgeted for that, potentially thinking the worst. It's not very often that the former governor threatened something and didn't come through, and so we wanted to make sure that we could, provide the academic program that we told the community we were going to try and provide. When that happened, we had that that extra money at the end of the year that you could use for one time, plus all those other monies. And so it became possible to do a project that is actually going to address the middle school in a way it really needs to be addressed. Mm-hmm. We couldn't possibly have fathomed that we could have before. Right. So to not take advantage of these funds in this way, I think would be tragic. Tragic. So it's really lucky that the things came through in the way they did, and we have the opportunity to do that. Mm-hmm. And I want to thank the business office for looking at things and coming up with some of the structuring it in this way to make something that wasn't possible, essentially at no cost to the taxpayer.
Honestly,
yeah,
we really cannot take credit for this, because when you really look at it, this is really through good planning. Mm-hmm. The school board and the administrations work together and put this together. Mm-hmm. Think about it. The ESSER grant was applied last year,
right?
And then we got approval last year, and the $8.9 million bond, we have leftover money and was designated for the middle school. That was going to be doing part of it. Mm-hmm. And then the $255,000, you can see last year when we proposed the budget, the previous administration, when they proposed the budget, they already put in $255,000 for the middle school specifically. So it's really just like what Shane talked about. Everything just comes together. Mm-hmm. And we are able to package it together and come up with this project.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so the budget presentation, we already finished the first two, and then the superintendent mentioned that on March 15th, the 3 schools will present their budget, and then March 29th, the 3 departments, special education, technology, and athletics, will present their budget. And April 5th, we'll present the non-instructional budget, and then the budget adoption is April 19th, and then the public hearing is May 3rd, and then the budget vote, and then the school board election is May 17th. I'll turn it
So-
over to the-
Sorry to interrupt one thing, I just want to mention one thing, the budget hearing on the 3rd is, the budget's already set, the board has already voted on it. We're just presenting it to the public, so if anybody has any questions or comments or wants to, try and influence the budget by coming and commenting in some way, needs to do that by the 19th. Because the 19th is the night we vote on it,
Of April.
of April, right. I just hate the fact that it's called a hearing, I've mentioned it before, because it's not changeable at that point.
I'll do the last slide first now.
Yeah.
It just lends itself very nicely to the conversation. Any comments about this budget? I talked about our fiscal goal, having transparent communication. Donna Vitucci, our board clerk, myself, or Mr. Chow are open and available for conversations. We are working with the PTA on taking our show on the road and talking to parents about where we are with this budget and what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. So I feel like this aligns nicely with our strategic plan strategy of communication and our district goal around fiscal responsibility and transparent communication. So as our president said, please reach out and talk to us about the budget. It will only help us refine our communication so that we make sure that people are really understanding some of the complexities around how we are required to move money around and how we want to fund our project and how we've built this budget to meet our needs. So just the highlights. I know that John presented a plethora of numbers and percentages, and it can get quite complex, but really here are the highlights for you. We are budgeting for the necessary personnel around those 4 pillars that I talked about. We are making instructional technology support services expansive. We have increased our supply and demand, and we need to make sure that we are maintaining it. It also strengthens, updates, and expands our infrastructure so that we can provide that future-ready curriculum and experience for our students that we talk about in our mission and in our curriculum strategy. We've talked extensively about the type of environment that we want to provide for our students and our staff and what kind of learning environment. This budget supports the middle school HVAC bond with no tax in-cap in this school year, which is tremendous. And most importantly to the taxpayers, it does come in below the tax cap. So we're trying to be very fiscally responsible and making sure how much of this we can do without being at the tax cap, which I think is a great testament to the value that we have in our community and how we really want to support the school district to be able to achieve the strategic plan, the mission, et cetera, to make sure that we remain as wonderfully Pleasantville as we can be. So again, thank you so much. Thank you to John in the business office, and thank you for listening to our overview presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.